In this tutorial video, we'll be creating a variety of different Twitter bots using Tweepy. We'll start off by setting up Tweepy, then we'll go through some of the most basic and most common features, and then after that we should be ready to create our different bots, namely a like bot, reply bot, and a retweet bot. If you find this tutorial helpful, please be sure to subscribe to the channel and like the video. Also check out my other social media for updates on the projects I'm currently working on. I'd really appreciate it. Let's get on with the video. Alright, so I'm in Twitter on my desktop. This is the account that I'll be using. Now in your web browser, open a new tab and type in Twitter Developer Portal. I'll leave a link to this site in the description, but if you search it, then click this one. For me, it's at the very top. Chances are that you might need to type in your phone number before you can do anything. So click on Add a Valid Phone Number. Then here on the right, click Add Phone Number. You then need to type in your Twitter password here and press Next. Then you can go ahead and add your phone number. After adding it, click Next, then click OK. Twitter will now send a code to your phone which you need to type into this text field here. Once that's done, click Verify. You now have a valid phone number added. You can go back to the developer portal and refresh the page. You can now see that we don't have any issues anymore. When you scroll down, you can then fill in this information. With the case, I'll be choosing making a bot. You're most likely doing the same thing, considering that you want to set up Tweepy, so you can also choose making a bot. With this last question, I'll be selecting no. Then click Next. Here, you just need to agree to the terms of service and then click Submit. On my side, I had to verify my email address first, so if you need to do that as well, just go to your emails and you can confirm your email by clicking the button on the email that Twitter sent you. After verifying your email, you'll be taken to this page where you need to give your app a name. I called mine TutorialBot246. After that, you'll be taken to this page with keys. It's usually a good thing to save these keys because we will be needing them, but we are going to be resetting them later, so we don't need to save them right now. You can go ahead and click on Skip to Dashboard, then click Yes, I saved them. You can click on Skip Tour, but I accidentally clicked on Let's Go in the recording. Once you're in the dashboard, you can click on Project 1 here, or in your projects and apps, click on Project 1 unless it's called something else for you. Once there, click on Apply for Elevated Access. This will give us access to more features on the Twitter API, but we need to apply first. Here on this page, scroll down a bit and select your current coding skill level. I chose some experience and then I clicked Next. This next page is quite self-explanatory, but basically you need to fill in all of this information. So I'll be speeding up the video. If you want to, you can read what I typed, but basically just make sure to give Twitter everything they need to know and what you plan on doing with your bot. For this last one, the one about government, I just ticked no at the top right here. After this, you can click on Next. You can then review all this information and make sure everything is correct, then click Next. We should now be granted elevated access. Now go back to the dashboard and then here on the key button, click it. We now need to click the generate button to generate our access tokens. We still don't need to save them because we'll be resetting them anyway. Then click Yes, I saved them. The reason we aren't saving anything now is because we want to set up the bot first. Sometimes when we change settings, we need to regenerate the keys and tokens, and so the old ones won't work anymore. So basically we want to change all the settings first before we save the keys. For example, the access tokens are created with read-only permissions, but if we want to do things such as tweet, like, and stuff like that, then we'll need to set it to other permissions, not just read permissions alone. So to do that, we need to go to the app settings, which you can access from the dashboard by clicking the gear icon. At the bottom here, at authentication, click Setup. Then here on this page, you can ignore the OAuth 2, but make sure to enable the OAuth 1. Make sure to select the setting that says read and write. And if you want, you can also select direct message, which would allow you to send direct messages. For the callback and website URL, I just went ahead and typed in some random URLs. I really don't think it matters too much. If you have valid ones which you can put here, feel free to do so. You can then go ahead and click save once that's done. Now we can go ahead and go back to our tokens page. Now we can open a notepad on the side here and we can finally regenerate the API keys. It's important to note that nobody else is allowed to see these tokens, otherwise they can access your Twitter bot. For the sake of the video though, you're allowed to see mine because I'll be deleting it afterwards. Make sure to then save them appropriately so that you know which one is which. After that, you'll need to save the bearer token as well, so regenerate that one as well and save it. Then for the access tokens, regenerate them once again and make sure to then save them as well. After that, make sure everything is saved and that you know which ones are which. If you need to regenerate them again, then feel free free to do so. We can now go to our desktop. For this next part, make sure you have Python installed. I have a tutorial linked in the description of this video, or you can click the icon at the top right of the screen. It's a really fast and easy process, and I also show you how to set up Visual Studio Code, which will be the program we use to write all our Python code in. After that, we can now install Tweepy. So open up a command prompt, or on Mac it would be called a terminal. On Windows, you can go to your search bar at the bottom left of the screen and type in cmd, then press enter. This will open command prompt, where you need to type the following command: pip install tweepy == 4.9.0. After this, wait for the installation, and then once it's complete, you can close this window. On my desktop, I'll be creating a folder. I'll be calling it Tweepy Bot. I'll then open it, make sure that you have file extensions enabled. You can do so by going to view, and then make sure this checkbox is ticked. After that, I'll be creating a new text file. You can call this whatever you want, but make sure you delete the .txt at the end and replace it with .py. This will let your computer know that this is a Python file. After that, you can press enter. I'll now be opening Visual Studio Code, and then I'll be dragging this folder that we just created into Visual Studio Code. On the left here, you'll see the Python file we just created. So just make sure that you've clicked it so that we're now inside of it. On the right here is where the actual code goes. So we can start by importing Tweepy. This gives us access to all features of Tweepy. We can now create 5 variables, namely API key equals 2 quotation marks, secret API key equals 2 quotation marks. We then do the same thing for the bearer token, the access token, and the secret access token. All of these should now represent empty strings. That is, they should be 2 quotation marks. Now, inside of each of the quotation marks, copy and paste the relevant key or token. So for API key, you'll obviously have to paste the API key that you saved earlier. Do the same for each of these. After that, we can connect the bot to the Twitter API. We do this by creating a client to access the API. And then we set this client to be a Tweepy client instance. Inside the brackets, we pass the following arguments in this order. We pass the bearer token first, API key second, then the secret API, then the access token, and then finally the secret access token. This next step isn't essential, but it would help you in case you decide to use some features of the older Tweepy version. So you type auth equals tweepy.oauth1 user handler. You then pass the API key, secret API, access token, then the secret access token. You then create an API object by typing tweepy.api and then passing auth as an argument. Tweepy is now technically fully set up, but we can test our connection and make sure everything works by creating a tweet. We can create a tweet by typing client.createTweet. Inside the brackets, we type text equals 2 quotation marks, then the text that you want to tweet inside of the quotation marks. So for example, I'll be typing hello Twitter. If we now run this code, we'll see that it runs for a really short while and then it will stop. So if we go back to Twitter now and we refresh this page, we can see that the bot made a tweet and it used the text that we specified in the code. Alright, here we are in Visual Studio Code with Tweepy already set up. I'll now be showing you the basic features of Tweepy. So we can start off with something simple, and that's creating a tweet. We can create a tweet by typing client.createTweet. This createTweet method has a few parameters, but to create the tweet, we'll only be using the text parameter. Inside the text parameter, we need to pass a string, meaning that anything in these quotation marks will be tweeted. So for example, if I say hello Twitter and I run this program, we can wait for it to stop running in the console. When we now go to the Twitter account with which this bot was set up with, we can see a new tweet that says hello Twitter, so we know that this works. The next few features I'll be showing you require tweet IDs, so I'll just be clicking on the tweet we made, and then this part of the link up here, the part with numbers, we need to copy, because we'll be using this to interact with the tweet. This is the tweet's ID. Later in this video and in future videos, I'll be showing you how to get tweet IDs using the bot without having to go onto Twitter every time. Back in our code, we can first of all delete this tweet method. We can then type client.like and then just paste the tweet ID into this method. This method likes the tweet that has this ID, so this will basically like the tweet we just made. Let's run the bot and go to Twitter. When we refresh this page, we can see that the bot has indeed liked the tweet we just made, which is pretty cool. Back in our code, we can delete this line and type client.retweet and paste the tweet ID in here. This will retweet the tweet whose ID we pass here. Instead of immediately running the code again, I actually want to show you how to leave replies as well. We again need to use the createTweet method. So client.createTweet, but this time we add a second argument to a parameter called inReplyToTweetID, and we then say that that's equal to the tweet ID. We can then pass text to the parameter we used earlier called text. This time, however, we'll say text equals hello user. Basically, this whole line of code will leave this reply to this tweet. If we now run our code and go back to Twitter, we can see that the tweet has indeed been retweeted, and we can also see that the reply feature works as well. The bot left a reply to its own tweet. We'll now be doing some of the more advanced features. I'll be showing you how to display each new tweet in your home timeline onto the console or terminal. So let's go over this real quick. We'll need to search for each tweet, and then for each tweet found, we need to output that into the terminal. Alright, so we type for tweet in api.home_timeline, and then inside the for loop, print tweet.text. This first line of code basically searches for each tweet in our home timeline. This api.home_timeline part stores each tweet in our timeline, and then this first part that says for tweet in basically retrieves each tweet one by one. This tweet variable here now represents the current tweet, and so inside of the for loop, make sure there's an indent here, then we can display the current tweet in the loop by using the print function. Inside of the print function, we could have displayed many things, but we'll be choosing to display the current tweet's text. So we type tweet, and then to access the text of the tweet, we type .text. Before we run the code, we want to just delete these lines of code here. Now we can run the bot, and in our console, we see that there are many tweets displayed. These are the tweets in our home timeline. So if we were to open Twitter now, then the tweets in our home timeline are going to be the same as the tweets displayed in the console. Instead of getting the text of the tweet, there's other information we could get as well, such as the ID of the tweet. We just have to change this to .id instead of .text. There are other things as well. I'll show some on the screen. We can now delete this entire block of code because I want to show you the last two features. It's possible to get the ID of a Twitter account. This is important if you want to, for example, follow some Twitter account or send messages or like all their tweets, etc. So I'll now be getting my own Twitter account ID through code. I'll be storing it in a variable called person. The actual method getting the ID is called getUser, and it's part of the client object. We need to pass an argument to a parameter called username. Inside of username, we need to pass the username of the Twitter account whose ID we want. You can pass any account in here, but I'll be passing the bot account that we're using to run all the code on. So the account is called tutorial account 8. This alone doesn't get us the ID, so we have to access it by typing .data.id. This person variable now stores the account ID of my Twitter bot. So now I can use this ID to do some things. I'll be showing you how to display or print each tweet that this account has made into the console. To do that, we type for tweet in client.getUsersTweets, and then we pass the ID of the account whose tweets we want, which in my case is stored in person. So we can then just type person in here. We then need to access the actual tweets, which are stored in getUsersTweets data variable. So we then type .data. For each tweet, we can then just print it into the console or terminal by typing print, and then passing the tweet's text by typing tweet.text. If we now run this code, then we should see all the tweets that this account has ever made in the terminal, which we do. Those are all the features I'll be showing you in this beginner Tweepy tutorial. Alright, so we're back in Visual Studio Code. In this video, we'll be creating a Twitter stream, which basically just means we're going to be writing a program that gets tweets as they're being posted. So for example, if we want tweets about Python, then we can create a Twitter stream that will retrieve all the recent tweets about Python as they're being posted onto Twitter. That's exactly what we're going to do now. We'll be creating a Twitter stream that retrieves tweets that includes at least one of the following terms: Python, coding, and programming. We'll need another library first called time. So up here, just import time. We can then create a list containing all the terms we want to filter, so we'll call this search terms, and in it will be a list containing strings of the following terms: Python, programming, and coding. You can add as many as you want here, and it also doesn't have to revolve around coding or computers. You can pass anything in here. We'll then create a class called myStream, and we'll make it inherit from the Tweepy Streaming client class. This stream class will then later be used to create the actual stream. Inside of the class, we now have access to some functions functions inherited from the streaming client class. One of the functions is the following: def on connect self, and then just inside of it type print, and then in quotations connected. Basically, this function will run once the stream comes alive and starts working. We have some more functions to play around with, but probably the most important one is the onTweet function, which basically gets called once the stream detects a tweet that matches the filter criteria. To use this function, we type def onTweet, then we use the parameters self and tweet. This tweet parameter will represent the tweet that the stream detects. Tweets have these properties belonging to them, and one of those properties is called referenced tweets, and it basically stores information which determines if a certain tweet is either a retweet or a reply. If this referenced tweets property is set to none, then it means that the tweet is original and doesn't reference any other tweets in any way. The reason I'm bringing up this property is because we'll be using it to discard tweets that are replies, because we're only interested in original tweets. We can do this by typing if tweet.referenced tweets is equal to none. Then we'll just print the text of the tweet for now. After printing a tweet, we'll add a delay of 0.2 seconds to the code, just so we don't get bombarded with tweets. So this time.sleep 0.2 line will do it. This number here represents the delay in seconds, and so this will be 0.2 seconds. Outside of the stream class, we can create an instance of the stream object by typing stream equals myStream, and then in here we need to pass the bearer token that we specified earlier. We then need to actually use the terms we created earlier to filter the tweets. So to do that, we'll be looping through each term. So we type for term in search terms, and then inside the loop we type stream.addRules. Inside of this we type tweepy.streamRule, and then we pass term in here. This whole chunk of code will go through each term we specified here and then add them as rules, which basically means we'll be searching for tweets that contain at least one of these words. We now have one final line of code, and it's to start the actual process of streaming and filtering the tweets. Stream.filter. If we were to now run our code, this would filter the tweets, but there's a problem. Even with this line of code here, we're still going to receive tweets that are retweets or replies. The reason behind this is that the stream doesn't yet have access to this referenced tweets property. So we need to give it access down here by passing an argument to a parameter called tweet fields. We need to pass a list containing a string that says referenced tweets. Basically, this line of code will filter the tweets correctly, and will also give the class to the referenced tweets property. Now we can finally run this code, and we should slowly start to see tweets coming in and being displayed onto the terminal. We can see that all of these tweets contain at least one of our specified terms. These tweets are also original and not replies or retweets. It's important to know that when creating stream rules, those rules don't get deleted once you stop the bot. So if I were to add more rules here, the old rules won't get deleted. To work with the different rules, you can use these other two functions. This one gets the rules and this one deletes them. It's also important to know that there are better ways to create this same program, but that's a bit more complicated, and so I'll be leaving it for future videos. Alright, so inside of Visual Studio Code, which is my code editor, we want to create a retweet bot. Now, in order to do that, we'll first of all need to get tweets to retweet in the first place, right? So we'll be using a method called streaming to receive tweets. This stream will basically listen to all incoming tweets related to the parameters that we'll set later. For now, we'll only look for tweets that contain the following hashtags: #Python and #programming. We'll also filter the stream so it doesn't include tweets that are retweets or replies to other tweets. So let's create our stream class. We'll type class myStream, and we'll make this class inherit from Tweepy's streaming client class. Inside of this class, we need to create functions, but these are special types of functions. So for example, def onTweet is a function that gets called when the stream receives a tweet. Inside of this function, we type self and tweet. This tweet parameter will represent the tweet that the stream detects. So since we now have access to the tweet, what do we want to do with it? Well, we want to try retweeting it, but before we do that, I want to show you that the stream works. So for now, we'll just be printing the text of the tweet. So we type print tweet.text. Outside of the class, we can create an instance of our stream object. This stream variable now represents our actual stream. Inside of the myStream class, we need to pass our bearer token to the bearer token parameter. Under here, we need to start the actual streaming of tweets. But we don't really want to do that just yet, actually, because we need to let the stream know what type of tweets we want first. To do that, we need to create these things called stream rules. Now, stream rules are basically rules we set that the stream needs to follow in order to find the specific tweets we want. So for our bot, we want to find tweets containing the Python and/or programming hashtag. To create this rule, we can store it in a variable called rule. The actual rule itself is tweepy.streamRule, and then inside the brackets an empty string. It's important to know that when creating stream rules, Twitter actually decided to have their own syntax for the string. So what I'm trying to say is the actual rule will be a string, and this string needs to be typed in a specific way. So let me just start typing and explain as I go. If I were to type hashtag Python in here alone, then the stream would return all recent tweets that contain this hashtag. If I now go ahead and add hashtag programming next to it, this means that the stream should contain both of these, which I personally don't want. So in that case, we make use of the stream rule logic operators. So to make sure we get at least one of these hashtags, we separate them with the word or in all caps. We can then put this in brackets to group them together. So basically, or means or, and one space means and, dash means not, and so if we don't want to include retweets or replies in our stream, we can create another set of brackets to group these terms. We then type dash is colon retweet and one space to indicate the and operator, then another dash is colon reply. This will ensure that we don't include retweets or replies in our stream. You can play around with this. I'll go ahead and leave a link to the documentation that helped me understand this. You can add as many terms in this bracket, just make sure to separate them with ors, unless you want both or more terms in the tweet. It also doesn't need to be Python or programming. You can feel free to customize this rule as you'd like. You can also add multiple rules if you wanted. Now that we've moved on from the rule, it's time to actually add this rule to the stream. We can do this by typing stream.addRules and then passing the rule into this method. We can also add an optional parameter called dry run, and it takes a boolean value which we'll set to true. The reason we're doing this is because if we were to run the bot and then stop running it, this rule that we've added won't go away, and so we'd have to manually delete it if we want to discard that rule. Dry run being set to true prevents this from happening. If you're happy with your final rule and you're certain you won't be deleting or changing it, then you can take away this dry run parameter, which is what we'll be doing. We can then actually start the stream by typing stream.filter, and so if we now run the bot, we'll start seeing tweets being displayed in the terminal. The cool thing is that all of these tweets follow the rules that we set above, so they contain at least one of the hashtags and aren't replies or retweets. We can now stop the bot by killing the terminal. We now have access to the tweets, and the main goal of this tutorial was to create a retweet bot. And so now, in order to retweet the tweet that we've received, we need to go back to the place where we print the tweet. Underneath this tweet, we can create a try and accept block. Inside of the try block, we can type the actual code for retweeting the tweet. That would be client.retweet, and then passing the ID of the tweet we want to retweet. This would be tweet.id. In the accept block, we can accept exception as error, and then if any error occurs, we can just decide to print out the error we've gotten. I don't think we need this try and accept block, but just in case I added it anyway. I now have Twitter open on the one side and the bot on the other. You can see that the bot has no tweets that it's retweeted. So if I now run the bot and give it a second to start the stream, we'll start seeing tweets in the terminal that are being retweeted. So if we let that run for a while and then stop the bot by killing the terminal, we can go to the Twitter side and we can refresh this page. We can see that the bot has retweeted several tweets, all following the rules that we specified earlier. We can start with the like bot, which is going to work similarly to my retweet bot, but we're going to be changing it to like tweets instead of retweeting them. The first thing we need to do is to create a Twitter stream, which is basically a stream which constantly looks for new tweets matching our criteria. I'm going to be typing the code and then explaining it afterwards. So we start by making a class called myStream, and we'll make this class inherit from Tweepy's streaming client class. This allows us to have access to this class's features. Inside of the class, we can type def on tweet and pass self, as well as tweet. This method will basically run each time the stream detects a new tweet. This tweet variable represents the tweet that we find. So inside of this method, we can create a try block, and inside of the try block, we can display the text of the tweet in the terminal by typing print, and then inside the brackets, tweet.text. We can then actually like the tweet by typing client.like, and then passing the ID of the current tweet we're working with. Every try statement needs an accept statement, so underneath try, we type accept exception as error, and then in the accept statement we can just display the error in the terminal or output. Alright, so what does all this do? Well, here we're creating a stream class, which will later be used to create the actual stream object. Inside of the class, we're creating this method down here, which will run every time the stream detects a tweet that matches our criteria. We'll be setting the criteria later. Now, since this chunk of code happens every time we detect a new tweet, we need to like the tweet. But since we're quite scared of getting errors, we're putting it inside of a try and accept block. This try and accept block just makes sure that in the event of an error, program continues running even after the error was detected. This line of code here is the actual piece of code that likes the tweet. Alright, now that we've defined the class and what it should do, we can go ahead and create the actual stream object. So we can create a variable called stream and set it equal to an instance of my stream. Make sure to pass your bearer token in the bearer token parameter here. This next part might become a bit complicated, but basically we're going to be setting our bot's filter rules. I explain what the filter rules are in this video, which I'll link at the top right and in the description of the video. But just a quick recap, these rules will determine what tweets the bot will look for. So for example, if we wanted tweets that contain hashtag Python, then we'd need to create a rule for the bot to follow where the rule states that the bot should only search those types of tweets. The thing with these rules is that setting them is quite complicated, which is why I encourage you to watch the video I recommended a few seconds ago. The bot we create there is very similar to this one, so you can feel free to skip to that part of the video. I'll also leave a link in the description to Twitter's own documentation where they explain how to set these rules. For now, I'll quickly try to explain the basics. We can create a rule by typing stream.addRules, and then we need to pass tweepy.streamRule, and then inside of these brackets we need to create a string. This string has special syntax. If you wanted to find tweets containing a certain term, let's just take hashtag Python as an example, then you would type hashtag Python. If you wanted to search for two terms, then you would type or and then hashtag programming. This will make the bot look for tweets containing at least one of these terms. If you want the bot to look for tweets containing both of these terms, then you would take this or away and make sure there's only one space between Python and programming. Now, to make the bot not include retweets and to not include replies in our search, we add this part to the string. This basically means we don't want retweets, and this part means we don't want replies. This dash sign means not, so we're basically saying not retweets and not replies. This entire rule will now make sure that we only receive tweets containing either or both of these two terms, as well as no retweets and no replies. In your rules method, you can also add this parameter. This is important if you want to test these rules. If this parameter wasn't added or set to false, then our bot will keep these rules forever until we delete them. You can delete them with this piece of code. I also explained this much better in the video I recommended earlier. Now that we have our rule added, we can actually now start the stream. We do this by typing stream.filter. We are now able to run the bot, but before we do, I want to add a delay in the code because we might get a lot of tweets. So at the very top of our code, we can import time, which will allow us to work with things related to time. And now back at the bottom inside of the class, make sure to type this under the try and accept block. We can type time.sleep, and then whatever number you put in these brackets will be the number of seconds the bot pauses before continuing. So for mine, I'll just make a 1 second delay. I now have Twitter open on the one side with our code on the other. We can see that the bot hasn't liked any tweets. And so if we run the bot and we wait for a short while, we can start seeing tweets coming up in the terminal. If we let the bot run for a while, we can kill the terminal, which stops the code running, and then in Twitter we can refresh this page and we can now see that the bot has liked many posts. Each post matches the rule that we created earlier, so the tweets contain either hashtag Python or hashtag programming, and they aren't retweets or replies. For the reply bot, let's just think about this real quick. We always need to start with what the bot should do, and that's to reply to tweets that mention us. Alright, so that means we need to find those tweets that mention us in the first place. So hopefully Tweepy has a method or function for finding tweets that mention us, right? So let's put it to use. Let's start by creating the message we want to reply with first though. We can create a message variable here, and it will be a string, which means that anything we put into these quotation marks will be the message we reply with to the users. For now, I'll make my own message say, send me a message if you have any questions. You can put anything in here. You might even leave your email or phone number or something if you wanted. Now, each account on Twitter has an ID. So later, when we search for tweets mentioning us, we'll need our bot's ID so that the bot knows it should search for tweets mentioning us. So let's get the bot's ID and store it in a variable. We can call it client ID, and then we get the actual ID by typing client.getme.data.id. Now this client ID variable stores the bot's Twitter account ID. Now we want the bot to keep on looking for tweets that mention us. So to do that, we'll put the bot in a loop where it keeps on searching for new tweets. We can create a loop by typing while true, and then inside of the loop, we want to type the code that searches for the mentioned tweets. So to search the tweets that mention us, we'll create a variable called response, and inside response, we'll store client.getUsersMentions, and then we'll pass our bot's ID that we created earlier. So we type client ID. This entire line line of code will search for tweets that mention us, and if it finds any, it will store those tweets inside of this response variable. So that means we now need to access this response variable and check if it received any tweets. We do this by checking if it's not empty, and we do that by typing if response.data is not equal to none. This will check if it's empty, and if it's not, well, then it means there's one or more tweets that mention us. So then inside of this if statement, we create a for loop, which basically just means we're going to go through each tweet that the bot received. So for tweet in response.data, and then inside of the for loop, the code we type now will happen to each tweet that mentions us. Just to be safe though, I like to use a try and except block. What a try and except block does is it tries to execute a certain chunk of code, but if it gets an error, then that code won't stop, and the code in the except block executes as well. So to do this, we type try, and inside of try, we can type print and then tweet.text. This will just display the tweet's text in the terminal. But to actually respond to the tweet, we type client.createTweet, and then we access a special parameter in here called in reply to tweet ID, and we pass the tweet's ID. We can then also access the text parameter and pass message in here. This createTweet method is quite self-explanatory. It does exactly what it says it does, but it might get a bit complicated with this in reply to tweet ID part. Basically, if we didn't have this tweet ID part here, then the bot would just go ahead and tweet this. But by passing tweet ID into this reply to tweet parameter, we're letting the bot know that the tweet it's about to make is reply to this tweet that we pass here, which is the tweet that mentions us. With every try block, we need an except block. So underneath all this, we type except, and then inside of except, we can just type pass. This will make the bot ignore errors if it receives any in the first place. This should technically be all the code, but I just want to add one last feature. I want to add a delay of a few seconds in the code, because think about it, we don't want the bot executing all of this code many times over the period of 1 second. So instead, we'll make the bot search for new tweets only after a set amount of seconds, which you'll obviously get to set yourself. To do this, we need to go to the very top of all the code, and underneath import Tweepy, we need to import a library called time. So import time. This allows us access to work with features relating to time. Back at the bottom of our code, we can type time.sleep, and then inside the brackets here, you can type any number. This number will be the amount of seconds your bot will wait before searching for the next set of tweets. So for mine, I'll set it to search for new tweets every 5 seconds. Also, make sure this time.sleep line of code is in line with the response line of code.
Hi guys, sorry there was a problem with the bot where basically it got stuck in a loop with another bot because that other bot kept on mentioning my bot, and then my bot kept on replying to that bot, and the loop just kind of continued for some reason. I don't know how or why, but basically to fix it, or to prevent your bot from facing this problem, make sure to add this line of code, add this piece of code here, and then add this line of code here as well. Basically, this since ID parameter, you can ignore these 3 lines of code for now. This since ID parameter basically just tells the bot to search for tweets that have an ID newer than the ID we pass here. So it's okay for the ID to be 1 at the start, which is, we just have to set it to something, because down here we're setting it to be one of the latest tweets' IDs anyway. But in the case of my bot, I didn't do this, and what ended up happening was the bot still received or captured those older mentions from the other bot. And so the reason I added these 3 lines of code here was basically to just get one of the most recent tweets' IDs anyway. But you shouldn't need to add these 3 lines of code. You just need to add this line, this piece here, and then this line of code as well.
I now have Twitter open on the one side and the bot open on the other side, and so I'll now be running the code on the right, and then on the left I'll be creating a tweet mentioning myself. So I'll just type hi and then the bot's username. If I now tweet this and we wait for a short while, I'll refresh this page and we should see that the bot has responded to this tweet, and the tweet is exactly the message that we wanted it to send. With all that, please remember to subscribe, like the video, and turn on the bell notifications, and also check out my other social media as well as my Discord. Other than that, I hope this video was helpful, and I hope to see you in the next one.